Hi, my name is Kelp, and this is The Lion of Poetry. As a postscript to last week's episode on Walt Whitman, I would like to dedicate the next few episodes to poets that were influenced by Whitman, both thematically and stylistically. The first poet that I want to discuss in this episode is the African-American poet Langston Hughes, who has been called the quote-unquote Black Walt Whitman. And indeed, Langston Hughes was greatly influenced by Whitman. He saw Whitman as his literary father. Just as Whitman had a broad, sweeping vision of America and its promise of freedom and democracy, Langston Hughes also had a vision of America, but a significantly darker vision. Seen through the lens of an African American, there was obviously a lot to be desired in the realms of freedom and democracy. Hughes wrote a poem called I Too Sing America, which is his response to Whitman's poem, I Hear America Singing. We'll come back to this poem in a couple of minutes. There's another poem called Harlem, or more popularly referred to as A Dream Deferred, which is the poem that Langston Hughes is most famous for. It's a very good poem, and it's the one that is most anthologized and most quoted. One might get the idea that Langston Hughes was a one-hit wonder, that he just lived on the reputation from this one great poem. We'll come back to this poem as well in a couple of minutes. With regard to Langston Hughes being a one-hit wonder, nothing could be further from the truth. I gave myself a project to read this book, The Collected Poems of Langston Hughes. See how thick it is. To read it page by page, poem by poem. I wanted to really understand him as a poet and to see how he evolved and matured over time. Initially, Langston Hughes wanted to be a kind of folk poet, a poet of the people. He wanted to be a black poet for a black audience. And because his audience was largely uneducated and working class, he wrote poems with simple words and simple rhymes. Early in his career, he was influenced by blues music, which is characterized by repetition and rhymes and a kind of self-effacing humor. Many of his early poems might have been lyrics to blues songs. Here's an example, an excerpt from Po' Boy's Blues. Po' Boy Blues. When I was home, the sunshine seemed like gold. When I was home, the sunshine seemed like gold. Since I come up north, the whole damn world's turned cold. Weary, 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 early in the morn. Weary, weary, early in the morn. I's so weary, I wish I'd never been born. Note the use of plain, colloquial language. It successfully evokes the speech of the common man, the working man, the black man. As Hughes evolves in the 1920s and 30s, he becomes a key figure in a movement called the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was an intellectual and cultural revival of African-American music, dance, art, fashion, literature, theater, and politics, centered in Harlem, Manhattan, New York City. The movement reached its peak in the 1920s and 1930s, and some people say that it has continued to the present day and can be seen and felt in the art and culture of hip-hop and rap. Characterizing the Harlem Renaissance was an overt racial pride and the idea that through intellect, as expressed through literature, art, and music, one could battle against racism and stereotypes and promote a more progressive and tolerant society. And pervading everything was jazz music, the great African-American contribution to culture and to societal norms of what is cool and what is not. Along the way for Langston Hughes, there was a fair amount of frustration and pain expressed in his poetry. The frustration of the Black Army veterans of both world wars, fighting for freedom in Europe, only to return home to segregation and discrimination in the US. The frustration of being told to wait, to be patient. Like many artists in the 1930s, Hughes dabbled with the idea that communism may offer a better chance for racial equality than democracy. And this too he expressed in his poems. In the end, Langston Hughes never saw a resolution to the race problem in America. The issue is ongoing to this day. His contribution to the battle, though, was a raising of awareness, a call for sensitivity. He addressed many poems to the white man. A couple of poems he even addressed to the president in an effort to communicate a message of humanitarianism, but sometimes also to shout out a warning. Watch out, he seems to be saying. If you don't start treating us right, it may not go so well for you. Watch out. So let's return to the two poems that I mentioned earlier to see these themes played out. We'll start with the earlier one, I Too Sing America. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. The poem is about the black quote-unquote kitchen help who serve the whites and then go off to eat by themselves in the kitchen. It's a metaphor for segregation, which was alive and well when this poem was written in 1926. But we have a watch out warning in the second stanza. The day is coming, says the poet, when I'll be at the table when company comes, and nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. There will be a day of reckoning. The racism and discrimination can't go on forever. And then, in the spirit of the racial pride that was the hallmark of the Harlem Renaissance, the poet says, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. Black is beautiful, to quote a phrase. People are going to see this one day, says the poet. And I think this was prophetic. The last line echoes the first line. But in the first line, the poet says, I too sing America. With regard to singing America, a black person's voice is as authentic as a white person's. In the last line, the poet makes a subtle change from I too sing America to I too am America. Don't try to disqualify the black experience of America, the poet is saying. The black experience is as valid as the white experience. The black contribution, whether in the arts or literature or music, is as valid as the white contribution. The black sacrifices in the wars as great as the white ones. Black blood is as red as white blood. You may think of me as a second-class citizen, says the poet, but I am really as much a part of the fabric of society as you are. And now his most famous poem, Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? This poem was written in 1951. It's a lot angrier than the previous poem. A dream deferred could refer to the promise of freedom that keeps getting delayed, or it could be an individual's dream of success, recognition, prosperity, which always seems to elude the working man and the working woman as they expend their energy day after day making a living. What happens, asks the poet, when a dream keeps getting put off and delayed and derailed? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Famous line, Raisin in the Sun, which became the title for a play or in a movie. Does the dream dry up like a raisin, get desiccated, or does it fester like a sore? Does it keep bothering you? Does it stink like rotten meat? Does it become unbearable? Does it sag like a heavy load that you seem to be carrying with you all the time? Or do you find a way to sugarcoat it? And that becomes a way of coping with the disappointment. Or, and here's the watch out, does it explode? Langston Hughes is warning white America, if you keep stomping on our dreams, it may come back to bite you. You can't keep pushing a person down and not expect that at some point they're going to push back. Again, prophetic. Some of my favorite of Hughes's poems are the short, pithy ones, and he wrote hundreds, literally hundreds of them. Here's one to finish our episode. It's called Advice. Advice. Folks, I'm telling you, birthing is hard and dying is mean. So get yourself a little loving in between. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on The Lion of Poetry.
Hey, last Thursday, I was buried in the country dirt. One wheel up, the other buried in God's holy earth. Had a vision, I was free and lived a life of worth. A leader to the people and a voice every person heard. If I humble down and put aside my shallow pride, I live on to be a king with inside many sides. A father to forgotten children, broken up and tied, and the sun will never set on my empire. I'm here to wake y'all up from the hollow truth. If it's angry at your hood, then that's what you'll produce. And I flirted with the end, but never bit the dust. I stayed up through the struggle, now I'm down for love, yeah.